Hello again, this is Michelle, and today I'm going to show you some interesting things that you can do with your XRGB-Mini Framemeister. So there's a lot of videos on the internet about the Framemeister, but I've been doing some things that I haven't seen people talk about on the internet with the device. So I wanted to kind of share some of those with you and maybe give you a few tips if you want to go a little bit outside the box with it. So the first thing is I have an HD TV, but I don't like having the widescreen. You either have to stretch the image to the widescreen format, or you get big black boxes on either side, and I just don't like that. So what I have done is I have bought a 4:3 aspect ratio. This is actually a computer monitor slash TV, but of course it does not have HDMI. It's actually very hard to find anything in 4:3 aspect ratio that has HDMI. So what that means is you're going to have to use DVI, and as you may know, the Framemeister does not have a DVI port on it. So what that means is you will have to buy an adapter. Now I have here a cable that is HDMI on one end and DVI on the other end. This works actually great, except for one small problem, which is that the DVI format does not, in most cases, and definitely not in the case of this monitor, have audio on it. So when you plug your devices to the Framemeister, you've got to find some other way of getting audio to the TV or your stereo. Normally I use the stereo, but today I'm using just the TV. In this case, that means phono stereo jacks. On this one, there's this phono jack on the back, and I either have a, on the other end I have RCA here, or in some cases I have just a two-way phono, one on this side and one over here, as you will see, which is useful for systems that have their own headphone jacks. You don't really need to mess with it. But if they don't have their own headphone jacks, then you get a little bit more complicated problem. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, if you go into your menu, you have output mode. If you select DVI and hit OK, it puts it in DVI mode, and you'll notice that the HDMI output settings are all grayed out. However, the DVI output settings are open, and this gives you a selection of computer-based resolutions which are better for computer monitors that are using the DVI format. 1280 by 1024 is what I use with this monitor. I think it's the highest this monitor can actually go, and it gives the best pixel, one-to-one sort of pixel relationship. So that's good for me. It actually works quite well with both 240p and 480 signals. So the first thing I will show you is a quick tip about the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. This is the Japanese Mega Drive 1 here, and this particular model has RGB output. So this is the RGB cable here, and the Mega Drive does not output stereo on the AV jack. Now this particular RGB cable has a headphone port on it, so you can plug the headphone jack here and get audio straight through your RGB that's in stereo. Since I'm using the DVI, and I can't do stereo through here, I can't do sound through here at all anyway, I just have direct headphone jack straight to the TV, which I will go ahead and plug in, and I'll show you. So the problem that you may encounter, and we'll see, we might or might not encounter it in this particular situation, but I'll give you an idea. When you use the Mega Drive, is that sometimes the sync rate causes problems and you get a flashing screen. Now, right now, it's not really an issue. The screen's doing just fine. I believe I have it in sync mode of off. No, it's on auto. It's on auto. Sometimes auto works and sometimes it does not. If it doesn't work, you can set the sync mode to off, and then you can manually adjust the sync to where it will actually pick up correctly. Now this apparently is fixed if you have a raw sync cable instead of a composite sync. But this was what I had. So if you go to the sync set and then the sync level, right now this is on level 4, which seems to work great, I've noticed. 5 also seems to work. 6 gives you problems. 7 works some. 8 also gives you problems. And I believe 8 is what it typically defaults at. So I've been leaving it at 4 and not having any problems. And as you can see, I've got the sound. So that works great for the Mega Drive. But what about systems that don't have a headphone jack? So I'll show you my solution for that. Is kind of a unique one. So first, we have a VCR here. And this VCR has AV output right here. And on the other side, there is the RF adapter is plugged in to this Famicom here. I'm going to go ahead and show that to you before I answer the sound question. Just so you can kind of see what AV looks like running through a VCR. So we're going to plug this into our audio cable that goes directly to the TV. And in this case, this won't be a problem because we're using RF to the VCR, and the VCR is outputting a standard AV signal, composite signal. Too many letters, I know. So let's switch this to video on the Framemeister here. And we'll turn on our Famicom. Of course, it will take a second to come up. Oh, just here. Oh, wrong side. So you might not even be able to see it, but there's a little bit of a distortion here with the RF adapter. But for the most part, it's surprisingly clean using the RF adapter through this VCR. There's a bit of waviness through here, some grain. It's not perfect. The picture has, the standard distortion that you would expect with an RF adapter. But the scan lines do show up. The size is where you would expect it to be. And all in all, it looks pretty clean for, an RF signal. Which actually gives this the illusion of running a CRT television when you were a kid and you had the RF adapter plugged in. With those scan lines and everything, and the aspect resolution is right. So this seems like actually a fairly good way of using the original Famicom, because this one does not have any sort of composite video or S-video or anything unless you mod it, which I can't really do right now because I'm in Japan and I don't know enough Japanese to ask someone or where to find them. But now, like I said, what if you're using RGB with a system that does not have a headphone jack like we have over there? So for example, here is the Super Nintendo, or the Super Famicom, this is the Japanese version. And here is our RGB cable. Now the first option that we have is to simply use an S-video cable, which I have right here. And in all honesty, this is quite good. This actually gives you a picture on this particular TV, because of the 4:3 aspect ratio, and the lower resolution, it gives you a pretty solid picture. There's some background things that you won't quite pick up that become a little bit, distorted, washed away just slightly. But for the most part, this is actually a fairly good solution, and you've got your audio separated so you can just plug it in like you would here. But let's say you're a purist and you really want your RGB. What do? Well, we'll show you. Now this is a good, quick, easy solution that doesn't require any modifications to the console or to your Framemeister. And it's actually pretty common sense when you think about it. We'll plug in our RGB here, and that gives us our video from the Super Famicom. To get the audio, however, we simply take this little RF adapter right out of the Famicom here and plug it into our Super Nintendo. And now on our VCR, we have the audio connected to the cable that's going to the TV. And the video is not really anything because of the VCR. So now, we'll turn on the Super Nintendo, and here we are on video, right? So you will actually see the RF picture should come up here. You get the RF with its old-fashionedness. And you can very definitely see that's an RF signal. It looks pretty good, I think, for RF. But the Super Nintendo also just has a better RF in general. But as you can see, we get the audio. Switch it over to RGB. Audio is still there. Well, now that the monitor turns off. Now we have RGB video coming through the the AV out on here, and the audio coming straight off the RF through this little VCR. This way requires an extra component, but the sound quality is just as good. If you were a super extremist, you could possibly notice a difference in the sound quality, but radio frequency RF is radio, so it's going to sound as good as FM radio would most likely sound. And I've done this with my full stereo, with the full bass and everything, and there's no loss of signal, there's no loss of the low ranges. It sounds perfectly good. So that's a really simple way of getting around that problem. The next thing that I want to show you also uses the Super Famicom, but it's a little bit different. This is called the AD adapter, and I really love this. Now I did have to go in and cut out one little pin to fix a problem with the sound that's in this device. But this device has its own AV cable, which means you're not going to be pulling S-video from this unless you do a lot of serious modifications. And you're certainly not going to be able to pull RGB. I don't think it's even capable of outputting RGB. But you honestly don't really need it, if you ask me. Just plug it in here, plug in your video, which I'll go ahead and switch, and your sound. And what you end up getting are Game Boy Advance games on your TV. Now this is Super Metroid. Metroid Fusion. Oh, where'd the sound go? That's odd. For some reason, I'm not getting any sound. What have I done? That is very strange. It was working before. Did I plug the wrong thing in? Nope. sure why the sound's not working on that. The last time I attempted this, it worked just fine. I don't think I have plugged anything in wrong. Double check. Ah. Well, that's odd. Well, anyway, I don't know why it's doing that. I've never done that before. Oh, my cable was pulled halfway out. That's why. There we go. Okay, so anyway, Game Boy Advance games on your TV, they do look better if you put them on a widescreen TV, but I think they look just fine on here. And even though this is composite video, I think it looks fantastic. Let me turn the sound down. Granted, Metroid Fusion is one of the best looking Game Boy Advance games I've tried with this method. A few others don't look quite as good, but most of them do. So this is a really great way to play your Game Boy Advance games on a TV without using the GameCube Game Boy player, or for that matter, the Wii U. If you say it's a game that's not on the Wii U, or even if the Wii U might have some distortion or whatever. This one also, you can take the games with you as soon as you're done. So you can go from big screen to small screen without any real problems. And I haven't noticed very many problems with the AD adapter. Certainly none that makes it any game unplayable so far. The last thing I want to discuss is the PlayStation 3. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, PlayStation 3, that's simple. It's HD. You plug it into the HDMI port and go. And yes, you can do that. But what about games that you play on the PlayStation 3 that are not high-definition games? For example, PlayStation 1 games, PlayStation 2 games, classic re-releases like Jet Set Radio, or some of the Hudson games that were, PC Engine TurboGrafx games that were put on PlayStation 3. I have found that the best solution for that is to use a Sony S-Video cable. This is it here. Now they did make a S-Cart cable for the PlayStation 1 and maybe 2 that I believe would work with the PlayStation 3. You would of course need the adapter because that would be the European version. I don't know if they released that in Japan or not. But honestly, I think S-Video is perfectly fine for what we're doing here, especially on a 480 signal. With your HDMI, you're most likely going to get either a 720 or or at the very least a 480p, and the Framemeister just does not handle that quite as well, from what I've gathered. Especially not when you're using a screen like this. We certainly don't want our input resolution to be higher than the actual monitor is. Let me go ahead and plug in our S-Video cable. And then we'll turn on the PS3. Set ourselves to S-Video mode here. Now, if you were using HDMI with this particular setup, you would have to use the multi-out to get the sound on the PlayStation 3. Similar to what we did with the RF on the Super Nintendo. But we're not going to do that. So here we've got our games, and we've got scan lines, which is nice for the kind of stuff that we want to play. So just for a good example, we'll pull up Symphony of the Night. And as you can see, the signal just changed. Turn the sound up just a little bit here. see we have our scan lines. Maybe you can see. Not entirely sure. So right now it probably has smoothing on. If we turn smoothing off, we come back out here. With our scan lines and the Framemeister with the S-Video, this looks about as perfect as you could possibly get it for a PlayStation 1 game. It really does look exactly how the original was supposed to look. And when you're in the game, you can actually see how this game was one of those games that, even though it was the PlayStation 1, was still designed around scan lines being a thing. A lot of the pixel definition just does not look as good without the scan lines, perhaps you can see, as with. But if you go into your menu here, you can go down to status, full status, and as you see, we are in 480i, which means you're going to get the scan lines exactly where they should be. So that's also something you can do with the Framemeister. Now I do notice that the transparency here is not quite working the way it's supposed to. It's actually skipping the lines, which I think is incorrect. And there are ways to fix that. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head what they are. I do know that natural is recommended for, yeah, that makes a bit of a difference. Is recommended for 480i. And that actually does make quite a bit of difference. So those are some of the things that you can do with your Framemeister. If you have a 4x3 monitor lying around somewhere, grab yourself an HDMI to DVI cable and try it out. You might find it your preferred way to play. Alright, I'll see you next time. Bye!